It's such a pretty day. I'm taking a little extra time to sit out on the back patio and have a second cup of coffee. And that gives me a little time to have one last word about this month's theme. I'm writing a book about my adventures as a Charles Dickens interpreter, particularly about my work in presenting A Christmas Carol every year. I've performed that story from Connecticut to Alaska and had more than a few adventures. Dickens sprinkles that novel with all kinds of references to time. He talks about seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, clocks, calendars, and of course the novel itself is divided into past, present, and future. What he is trying to tell us is that we need to take time. A few years ago, I was hired to tell the story of Dickens' Christmas Carol in an art gallery. They had a big display about the life of Charles Dickens, and they hired me to come and perform A Christmas Carol. But the art director and I thought, we probably don't want to take time for the whole story because people are standing around, you know, in the museum and their legs will get tired. So here's what we'll do. When they get to a particular point in the display, they'll meet the storyteller, and I'll tell them that I'm a Dickens interpreter and that I present A Christmas Carol, have done so all over the place. And then I'd give them the opportunity to pick their favorite part. And I would just tell them a brief excerpt from the whole story. Well, that sounded like a good idea, except nobody showed up. So for about an hour and a half, I stood around in an empty art museum talking to the director, and then finally, my good friends Jim and Dolores Sitterson came in. They had seen a posting on social media about this event, so they wandered through the art gallery a little bit, and then finally they made their way over to me. Now, Dolores is a Southern lady, which means she always takes her time, which I think is a virtue. And Dolores heard all about how we had planned out the day, and she said, well, Tim, it's a shame that we're not going to hear the whole story, but if we're only going to choose a section, we have to hear of the ending where Scrooge gets his heart right. Otherwise, it would just be terrible. So I told my friends, Jim and Dolores, the ending of the story, which ends with, God bless us, everyone. And they went away, looked around in the art gallery for a while, and then they came back. Dolores says, Jim and I were talking, and, you know, after all, this is a ghost story. We should hear the part that's in the graveyard that's all dark and scary. Well, there was nobody else there, so I was happy to oblige, and I told them the scary part about the ghost of Christmas future. They went away, looked around the art gallery a little while, came back. Dolores said, Jim and I were talking again, and that part's so dark. We hate to leave on that note, so why don't we hear about the Cratchit's Christmas feast? So I told them that. They went away, came back. Well, now we'd like you to tell us the part about the ghost of Christmas present, you know, his big robes and all of that. So I told them that. They went away, came back. Dolores says, Jim and I were talking. A lot of things happen when Dolores says Jim and I were talking. And we think it's a shame not to hear about the ghost of Christmas past. And so I told them that section of the story. They went away, came back again, said, you know, we've heard all of it except the first. You might as well tell us that. And so they stood there in the art gallery, and I told the beginning of the story. We took time to work our way from the very last words of that novel all the way to the very first. I told the whole story backward over a course of a couple hours. Maybe it was a couple, 3 hours. I learned a valuable lesson from Dolores and Jim that day. Don't rush things. Don't cut things short. Take time. That was the one and only time that I had planned to tell only a portion of A Christmas Carol because we thought people would be in a hurry. And it turned out that my friends Dolores and Jim reminded me, don't do that. Don't cut things short. Take time. Taking time, that's a virtue.
bum, bum, bum.